And we are recording for the first time in several weeks, 100% due to me canceling and rescheduling, is Miss Clare Lopez, who's been on here before, 20-year CIA veteran, Lopez LLC, Liberty Lopez, Lopez Liberty. Not important. Recently had her birthday. Happy birthday, Claire. And
Thank you, Tommy. It's great to be back with you.
of course, and yeah, been a while since we talked, but we're getting back into it. For all future listeners, today is Thursday, December 9th, 2021. A lot of things going on right now, but I feel like I've maybe beaten COVID to a pulp with guests recently. So I'm gonna maybe jump to something else. I know, right? Kind of the biggest, I was watching the most recent interview you did with what was it? Was it ATP?
American Truth Project with Barry Nussbaum.
Yeah, I was just watching that. But I realized that was from, I don't know, maybe 15 days ago.
Yeah, I'm behind as well, getting them out to show people. Yeah, it was that long ago, I'm afraid.
So not obviously, not included in there was what's going on right now with Ukraine, and there's kind of, Biden saying nothing's off the table, and at the same time saying American troop deployments off the table, Ukraine saying that we couldn't withstand the Russian invasion. It's all what is going on right now, because you always have an ability to kind of cut through all the bullshit in a way that I could only envy and kind of say exactly what is going on. I fall trapped to all the this is happening, and I grasp my pearls, but you always kind of you have a cold, calculated ability, pearl clutching, freaking out about something that
wore pearls. That's very nice.
Well, I gotta look pretty. How else am I going to compete with these guys? But yeah. So what is going on right now with Ukraine?
Right. So the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, is massing troops once again on the border of Ukraine. That would be Ukraine's eastern border with Russia, and threatening, to all appearances, an invasion. Now, there is a slice of eastern Ukraine territory that's called the Donbass, which is just that eastern region there, where many Russian speakers live, and where Putin already has infiltrated a lot of militia fighters, not in Russian uniform, but they're Russian, and is threatening to carve off that section of Ukraine. Now, the thing is that Ukraine's not a member of NATO. So NATO members have no treaty obligation to come to its defense. But around Ukraine's periphery, along its borders, are a number of NATO members, which would then, in the case of Ukraine being overrun, be directly exposed to an expansionist Russia. And you might have seen that I tweeted recently, that even though we have NATO, we have no treaty obligation to do anything for Ukraine. It's not just about Ukraine, non-NATO member, anymore, as I tweeted today, that it was about the Sudetenland, just about the Sudetenland, or just about Czechoslovakia back in the time. And we said, never again, didn't we?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if Putin actually will go through with a land invasion of Ukrainian sovereign territory. I think it's a lot more likely that he'll continue to use these proxy militias to try to carve off that eastern region of Ukraine sort of de facto. But because the entire world, friends and allies and partners, as well as our adversaries and enemies, perceive a lot of weakness. I think I've called it a pile of limp spaghetti more than once in the White House. They're pushing it. They're pushing to see how far they can go before somebody stands up to them and they meet something more like steel than pudding.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit uncertain at the moment what will happen. But at the same time, I would say this: I've heard some commentary by U.S. leadership, who shall remain nameless, but let's say congressional members, talking about there's, nothing is off the table and first strike nuclear use is not off the table. I think that's reckless.
Yeah.
I don't think you say that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's prudent to say that. However, to say we stand with Ukraine, we will impose the most stringent expanded sanctions against Russia should Russia go ahead with an invasion. We will supply Ukraine with defensive means to stand up for itself. I think that would be appropriate. And then also, bringing in other NATO members who would be exposed, at that point on the front lines, were Ukraine to fall to Russia like it, had in the past, enlist their support to do the same kind of thing. We will join together in supporting Ukraine. We will join together in backing stringent sanctions. We will join together in opposing and shutting down the Nord Stream pipeline, that sort of thing. We will supply Eastern, Western Europe with the energy needs like natural gas that they may need this winter if that pipeline should get shut down. These are the kinds of things I would do.
Almost, if you will, a brilliant answer as always. Almost, if you will, like a Berlin airlift-esque energy deliverance. And the idea of, if you're in this sea of hostility, we'll create
if you're
this
cut
lifeline.
off from it's absolutely necessary to face the coming winter.
Yeah.
I know it's geographically less convenient to ship over from, let's say, North America,
Sure,
than to bring it through that pipeline overland from Russia. But if you get cut off, we're not going to let you freeze this winter. We'll do whatever we need to do to help you to get through the winter with the energy supplies you need.
Yeah. And I feel, and again, in my 31 years and being a biology major, and no means some West Point grad, I get everything I'm saying is wild speculation. But I also feel like the outright threat of nuclear war is, to me, it's not even, I wouldn't even say reckless so much as it's just, to me, that's kind of limp spaghetti, because everyone knows we're not going to do that. Everyone knows we're not going to do it.
Well, I should hope not, but I think it's very irresponsible and reckless.
Sure.
To even speak words like that.
No, sure. It's
whether you mean it or not, either way.
Yeah, and it kind of, what it does is it kind of diminishes the weight of words, though, when you say, it's like, if I remember one time my little brother was getting picked on by this guy at our high school. My older brother, who's built like a brick shit house. I remember my older brother's insane. He like picked the guy up by his neck or something. And I remember, but it was like a very realistic threat. This kid was new, and everyone kind of knew my older brother as just this sort of stoic, like, he'll do it. And I remember my little brother telling the guy that was picking on him, he was like, "Hey, my older brother's going to come like hit you." And everyone knew that was a valid threat. Now, if he had said something like, I'm gonna, some almost like a childish thing, like, I'm gonna beat you up, and I'm gonna destroy you, I'm gonna blow you up. And it's like, that doesn't mean
like
anything.
A Joe Biden kind of a threat. Take him out back of the barn, and
that's what I mean is,
punch him out.
Yeah, when I was a bouncer at bars, maybe this is a better analogy, and you'd see kind of two guys talking shit, and one would say, like, "You want to take it outside?" and the other would be like, "Yes." And then the guy that proposed it would collapse, because he was like, I wasn't banking on him saying yes. So what do you do when you have these sort of absurd threats? You can't, and you're probably not going to egg on my face if you do launch a nuke, but you're probably not going to. It also kind of diminishes things. So there's a lot you can do. And like you said, with appeasement, the Sudetenland and Lebensraum, like, there is this sort of precedent where it's like, we know it can't happen. We know appeasement, the early bird gets the worm, a penny saved is a penny earned, and, appeasement doesn't work. But the belligerent force, in my opinion, sort of has a leg up in that no one wants war. Like no one, everyone deep down inside is like, if we could just give them a peace, it'd be so much easier. You know, like China, it's on their side that like they could probably make a move on Taiwan because the rest of the world really wants no part of it. But at the same time, you know, if you don't draw the line there, where do you draw the line? And so I mean, I don't know. Again, there's someone with no experience in this, but is that what you think it would have to be? Not to reiterate what you just said, but would it have to be the equivalent of we'll provide, you know, like Lend Lease in World War II, or the equivalent of the Berlin airlift, like we'll provide energy, we'll provide weapons, as opposed to, I guess, the optics of, you know, just sending in the US military, especially when we're only a couple months removed from that well orchestrated and, you know, completely harmless withdrawal from Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah, no, I think there are a lot of ways to convey credibility, the credibility of deterrence that would work. And I don't honestly think that Putin really wants a land war in the middle of, I don't know, the Eurasian continent. I don't think he does, any more than I think China actually wants to invade Taiwan.
Yeah.
They don't. They want us to collapse and just let them have their way without actually going to kinetic warfare.
Okay.
That's what they want.
Okay. So what is it, just is it a waiting game? I mean, is it Casper Weinberger with Soviet Union saying we're going to spend them into the ground? Is that what they're doing? Are they just waiting for the American empire to collapse so they can just waltz on in? And if so, how is that different than what they've been doing for the last 10 or 20
Well,
years?
no, I mean, they've obviously, ramped things up in
Yeah.
these last 10 months or so. As I said before, pushing it, see how far they can go, see what they can get without provoking an actual all-out violent kinetic war. That's what they're trying to do, bluffing their way into what they want, knowing how weak the Biden White House is. But they don't really want a shooting hot war. They don't.
Yeah. What would be, do you think that this could possibly open up a situation where Ukraine joins NATO? Are they allowed
Well,
to?
see that, no, I think that would be a mistake also. I know that they want to. I know that Ukraine wants to join NATO. And this is exactly what the Kremlin opposes so strongly. They fear a NATO member right on their border. Ukraine would be. Ukraine right now is a kind of a buffer. On the other side of Ukraine, you've got what? Romania, you've got Bulgaria, you've got, the other members of NATO in the region. But Ukraine remains pro-Western, but a buffer that is not a NATO member. And that's probably the way we should leave it. That's probably the way Putin wants to leave it. But at the same time, we have to be credible enough with meaningful measures, retaliatory measures that we will undertake if he pushes in further. It's a fine line that has to be walked. Putin has to believe that we'll stand with Ukraine, not necessarily sending troops in. We won't do that, but standing with Ukraine in all the ways I just mentioned before, strongly enough to make it not worth his while, not worth Putin's while to provoke a hot shooting war. That Ukrainians would have enough defense capability, thanks to what we give them, sell them, that it would be more than Putin wants to bite off. Too much to digest.
Not worth his while.
Yeah. And then at the same time, they'll leave them as a buffer.
Yeah.
Pro-Western, they are. Kiev is, but not NATO.
So okay. So you kind of want to leave it as like a DMZ. You kind of want it as the
sort of.
Yeah. So now, if that's what we both want, if we don't want to be sort of touching the border of Russia, and vice versa. They don't want a NATO nation to be touching their border. What exactly is Putin's what is his end goal then if he is trying to provoke us to, because and again, in my
Well,
military
he's
mind.
trying to see if we'll leave Ukraine dangling out there, in which case he probably would slice off the Donbass using proxy militia.
And keep the rest as a buffer.
Yeah, maybe. I
Okay.
don't think he wants to march all the way to Kiev. That would be, he will not do that.
Okay,
I
that's
don't
what
think.
that's what I was trying to piece together. What is his end goal? Does he want, because it seems like,
He'll take the Donbass if we let him,
okay,
right? I
because
think through proxies
okay,
that are
yeah,
already there and already fighting. I mean, it already is a hot war for some people.
that's
Um,
what
but
started in, sorry.
he won't march all the way west to Kiev or the rest of Ukraine. And I think I've talked about this on your show before, that I consider Crimea a different case.
Yeah,
It's
I
a
was about to
completely
bring that
different,
up. Why is that?
because of history. So historically, Crimea, centuries back, had been conquered by the jihadist Ottoman Empire of Turkey. And it was occupied by these jihadis. And Catherine the Great of Russia liberated it, liberated Crimea, which were Slavic people. They weren't Turkish people. They were Slavic people, liberated them from the jihadi Turks. And forever grateful, Crimea joined Russia and became part of Russia and wanted to be part of Russia. And that was pretty much the situation up through the communist era, past the 1917 revolution. But then in the middle 1950s, about 1954, if I recall, Nikita Khrushchev of the then USSR, for whatever reason, decided to gift the Crimea to Ukraine. Now, at that time, Ukraine, just like Russia, was one of the Soviet Socialist republics within the USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So it didn't make a whole lot of difference in the whole, the entirety, that is, until 1991, when the USSR broke up geographically. And then, as Ukraine went free, Crimea was dragged with it. They didn't want to be dragged with it. They wanted to be Russian. A referendum showed that overwhelmingly the people of Crimea wanted to be with Russia, but they were dragged along with Ukraine because of the breakup of the USSR. And so for that, Putin kind of had an excuse, if you will, to grab it. Okay. Now, he met with, pearl clutching, as you might say, but no, not much other, response. But again, I think that Crimea is a different case. I think it could have been settled differently, a referendum, for example. And I also think that Russia taking Crimea back, then gaining, these ports and access on the Black Sea, and in a position, if you remember the geography, of the Sea of Azov,
warm water,
and then through the Kerch Straits that lead out into the Black Sea, to dominate and threaten those international waters and that strait, the Kerch Strait. That was, a consequence. I don't know, foreseen or not, certainly foreseen by Russia, but foreseen by the rest, I don't know. But not acceptable that Russia should, be in a position to threaten international shipping in the Sea of Azov, the Kerch Strait, or on out into the Black Sea, where other NATO states like Romania and Bulgaria border. But all that said, that's why I hold Crimea differently than I talk about Ukraine.
Okay.
The whole of Ukraine, or even Eastern Ukraine.
Okay. So if I'm Ukraine, I'm looking at it as, they both want me as a buffer. Russia wants Donbass. NATO doesn't want me in because they want a buffer. But I mean, just looking at it like game theory, if I'm leading you, I got to get the most for my people, and I want to join NATO. Could they try to use this to their own advantage and be like, look, we're going to completely collapse and not be able to stop Russia. And now they're going to be touching y'all. And now it's going to be the very thing you dreaded, having a NATO country touching Russia. Could they sort of be like, hey, we're not going to stop anything. If he wants to go to Kiev, I'm not going to risk my people.
Well, they
Unless,
will. I mean, they'll fight.
well,
They'll
yeah,
fight. I
yeah,
mean, these kinds of discussions might be going on behind the scenes. I don't know. But the Ukrainians will not just
yeah,
allow Russia to march on Kiev. No.
yeah,
I mean, they're fighting already to push them out of the Donbass, out of the eastern
yeah,
region.
yeah,
They're definitely not going to allow a full-fledged invasion without opposition. They'll fight. Whether
yeah,
they can stand up to them or not, they'll fight.
yeah. I
As
guess
they should. As they
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
naturally.
no, I'm not saying they shouldn't. Absolutely, no. That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's your sovereignty. But I mean, it seems, and this again in my short life, but it seems like every X number of years, we see the Russian bear kind of poking a cloud. It's Georgia, and then several years later, it's Crimea, and then several years later, now it's Donbass. I mean, eventually, you got to look at it and go, so we want Ukraine to remain a buffer, and I know Crimea, Georgia, but eventually they're going to keep pushing until the very thing that we're trying to use the buffer as a preservation for, not having a NATO country touching Russia. Eventually, it's going to be here anyway. So it's like that saying, change change in the way you want while you still can, instead of changing because you have to. If the end game is going to be Russia touching a NATO country, why not get out in front of it and make it happen on our terms? Again, as an armchair general.
Yeah, I don't think we want to be provocative
Yeah.
in a way. I mean, there's no reason why we have to be at daggers drawn with Moscow all the time. We don't.
Yeah.
There are areas and things, on which, in areas in which we can talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, of course, we'll recall, of course, that Putin has said that the biggest disaster of his lifetime was the collapse of the USSR.
Well, that's a huge part.
And he wants to reestablish that influence over what he would consider the near abroad for Russia. And that's what he's doing. I mean, like, he hasn't got enough to take care of already. Well, he looks westward and sees NATO, and he doesn't want NATO any closer, and he doesn't want any of his near abroad to be any more sympathetic to close to NATO.
Well, like any great leader, and I say that sarcastically, why address the problems at home when you can just create a bubble of expansionism and ride on that wave? That's a huge part, though, is looking at his psychology. And again, not as a doctor, but I mean, it's like, well, what does the guy want? Is this a Nobel Peace? No, this is a guy, a KGB agent who said the worst thing of his life. I mean, it's like how embarrassed Hitler was after World War One, and we're like, who's this Hitler guy, and he wants the Sudetenland. Well, actually, he has never been more discussed. He said the worst day of his life. He said for him the war never ended. He said the worst day of the war for him was the Treaty of Versailles, I think. And it's like, oh, this guy who sees, Germany, the Teutonic World Reich, as his destiny and his right. Oh, that's the guy we're giving land to. So and again, not to immediately go up to literally Hitler, but when you're looking at a guy who does feel, the Soviet Union collapsed and it's the worst thing that happened in his life, and now we're looking at Georgia, Crimea, Donbass. Again, where's this going? Like, how can, and I'm with you, we don't need to have daggers drawn. Not everything needs to be
this
$1 trillion
did not
war.
happen. The Ukraine itself was not threatened this way when President Trump was in office.
Touche.
China was not flying fighter jets into and over Taiwanese airspace when Trump was in office.
Touche.
It's a perception thing about where the United States is, and the entire world, as I said before, friends and enemies alike, they see the United States as collapsing right now, literally collapsing. and they see a window of opportunity
Mhm.
because they know Trump's coming back, but they got to get what they can get, whatever they can get as fast as they can
Yeah.
now, just like the Democrats, the Democrat Party. Get it
Yeah.
now because you're going to be stymied, coming up.
It's like when you get a substitute teacher in like middle school, and not like when you have a sub for like a day or two, but when like a teacher would get pregnant or something would happen, and we'd have a substitute teacher for like a month or 2 months. But it wasn't that like the original teacher left. There was just this temporary gap. I mean, I remember in 6th grade, I forget what his name was, but he was in he had retired from the FBI, and I think they called him back because he had some expertise in something I don't remember. And but he was like our 7th grade like grammar teacher or something. And I remember he left, and he was a total hard ass. And he left for like 2 months, and we had kind of we had like a nice sub, but we little shit eating grin 7th graders, you know we took our Donbass, we took our Taiwan, we did everything we wanted, and we knew it was coming back, and we knew it was coming to an end. So we got ours while we could, knowing full well that eventually it came
It's
back.
human nature, right? I mean,
Yeah,
be it
why
kids
wouldn't
like
you?
you guys or
Or countries,
a Putin or a Xi Jinping
why wouldn't
or an
you?
Ayatollah in
Yeah,
Iran.
and there's no one to blame but ourselves. I mean, we can sit here and say you shouldn't invade, but when in the course of all of human history has that ever worked out? No, you carry a big stick. That's the only way. That's the horrible truth. Is
But they have to believe that you're going to use the stick, not just
exactly,
carry it.
exactly.
The other side has to believe that you will use that stick if they cross that line, and make sure they know what that line is. And we're not doing that right now.
So so let's say all the sanctions happen. Let's say we dial it up to 11, we do it, and none of this stops. And I know you don't have a crystal ball. I just had on Dr. Malone, and I was asking him, I was like, where are the vaccines going? And he was like, as always, Tommy, you asked me for the crystal ball. And I was like, that's a very accurate response. And I realized I do that with you as well. I'm like, Claire,
Yeah.
what are the world's problems and how we solve them? And you're like, dude, I have 10
I
minutes.
wish
Yeah.
I could tell you.
But how does this play out? What if we do sanctions and it doesn't work? Or if, we still got like 25 minutes left. If you don't even want to talk about Ukraine anymore, what else is on your mind? Because it's been a while since we talked.
Well, I mean, we can talk the same kinds of themes, with regard to Iran, driving pell-mell for a deliverable nuclear weapon, even as the regime's diplomatic negotiating team, plays games with the rest of the JCPOA team in Vienna. We could talk about Xi Jinping pushing the envelope out in East Asia, testing a hypersonic glide vehicle.
Let's do that. I want to do that.
Okay, we'll do that.
That's my hypersonic. What all do you think about that? And is there actually is it pearl clutching on our part that, because I mean, do we not have something like that? DARPA launched the HTV-2 in April 2010. That went Mach 23. The high test flight, the high test
We've got
vehicle.
absolutely
Falcon.
nothing that's been tested successfully on the scale of what China has now tested, a hypersonic glide vehicle, what Russia has tested, a hypersonic cruise missile. Not only do we not have them, at least in the proven stage, we don't have a defense against them.
Well, yeah,
that's you're talking about Mach whatever.
Mach 5 and up, yeah.
5 and up 10. We don't have a defense. We don't have anything that can stop it. Not only, is it that kind of speed, but it's the way it flies. And here's a couple things. The hypersonic glide vehicle that they tested uses what's called a no, you just described a ballistic missile pathway. That's not what they're doing. They are using a fractional orbital bombardment system pathway, which is a hypersonic glide vehicle, of course, is launched in the air, whereas a cruise missile from ground. But what it does is it, if you will, bounces back and forth between the upper atmosphere and actually the outer reaches, or the, well, I don't know what, reaches of space itself. and it bounces back and forth at these super high speeds, these Mach 5, 10, whatevers. And at the same time, because each of these vehicles has within it gyroscopes, like 3 or whatever gyroscopes inside of it, which can be adjusted in flight. So not only is it bouncing up and down between the atmosphere and space, that's the fractional orbital part. It can also swerve and change direction at those speeds. Oh yeah, and by the way, also, the Chinese demonstrated that at those speeds, in the middle of these different, speeds and course, swerving around, it can launch a missile. It can launch a missile in flight while it's doing all of that. Oh, and one more thing. It comes up at us like the old Soviet concept of fractional orbital bombardment system out of a polar trajectory. That is coming out of the South Pole, over the North Pole, around, up out of the South Pole. And why? Because all of our defenses here point north and west. NORAD, NORTHCOM, our defenses point toward the North Pole.
Yep.
China, North Korea, Russia. But along our Gulf Coast and our Atlantic coast, zero radar, zero land-based missile defense, zero. Now, they've known this for a long, long time. They just refuse to do anything about it. But that's the other part of fractional orbital bombardment system. It comes up out of the South, where they know we have no defenses.
So it's like the archer shooting the knight with the arrow in like the one spot where there isn't any metal. Get right into the arm. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Kind of.
So yeah, this is a very serious threat. It is something that we do not have in our arsenal, at least tested, proven at that level. And we have no defense against it right now.
I wouldn't maybe say a fun fact, perhaps that's the wrong adjective. Did you know that the Nazis were developing, and they called it the Silbervogel, which stood for silver?
That's why we took all the Nazi scientists during and after the war and brought them over here.
Yeah, the Silbervogel was going to be an antipodal bomber that bounced off the atmosphere, and they were trying to launch it in like 1944. So, we snagged that guy and brought him back, and that indirectly led to the X-20, which led to the space shuttle. But yeah, I remember watching a video not that long ago, though, and it was talking about hypersonics as a destabilizing technology. So it kind of seems like the only way all of this, right? Because, one power gets a nuke, the United States, like that's destabilizing. When Russia got one, yes, we went into the Cold War. We were always on the brink of thermonuclear Armageddon, but there is a stabilizing aspect to
MAD. It was called MAD.
Yeah.
It?
Well, it's madness. Yeah. But yeah, mutual assured destruction. Yeah. It seems like you almost need that with hypersonics. Is like, okay, they now have it. Cat's out of the bag. We have to have it. And you might, again, in armchair general, it might, like ICBMs, resistance might almost be futile. So the most you can do is let them know that they're also futile, that will come at you.
At the very minimum, we need a defense.
Yeah.
We need a way to defend against that weapon. And we don't have it right now. And I don't know, at what stage they are in working on it, but woefully behind the Chinese, who are ahead of us in more than one area.
Navy.
They're ahead of us in space technology. They're ahead of us in artificial intelligence. They're ahead of us in hologram technology. They're ahead of us. I could go on and on. Plus, we let them make all of our pharmaceuticals, or nearly all, 90% of our drugs and medical equipment. This has just been absolutely suicidal.
Yeah. So with that, also to go on your video, what was it? Biden most certainly. I see the initials in my head. Biden most certainly to join something about Iran and then their nuclear warhead.
Oh, the JCPOA?
Yeah.
Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or just call it the nuclear deal with Iran.
Okay.
He wants to, but here's the thing. he desperately wants to, and so many of the people inside of the Biden administration are retreads from the Obama years, and they've just been brought back. You know, Antony Blinken as Secretary of State, for example, Jake Sullivan at the National Security Council, National Security Advisor, and so on. Avril Haines at the DNI, at the ODNI. So these are the same people that were trying to, wreck America back in the Obama years. Well, they're back in now, and they want to chalk this up to their, I don't know, diplomatic column or something to get back into the nuclear accord. But here's the thing: since July of 2015, when that accord was reached, it's been 6 years plus now, and Iran has just busted out of every provision of that accord. They are enriching more uranium than allowed. They are enriching uranium to a far higher percentage of enrichment than allowed. They were supposed to be up to 3.67%. They openly have talked about enriching to 60%, which actually you could make a bomb out of that, but ideal is weapons grade above 90% enrichment of uranium. So they're doing that. They are installing much more advanced, faster, better centrifuges. They're up to the 6th generation. You'll hear it called IR6, when they were only supposed to be at an IR1.
Oh, Jesus.
They have installed centrifuges at Fardo, that underground, under mountain enrichment site, which they were not supposed to do according to the terms of the accord, the JCPOA. What else? They are fashioning, milling uranium metal, which has no other use except for fashioning the hemispheres of a nuclear bomb. They're doing that. And this, everything I just mentioned, that's all open. This is what, for example, the IAEA knows about, International Atomic Energy Agency monitoring body of the UN, right? That's what they know about, but they're not being allowed in. Oh, that's another provision. Oh, I forgot this one. In some of these suspicious sites, where the IAEA had installed cameras to keep an eye on things, in the absence of actually on the ground inspectors, the Iranians busted the cameras. They broke them. And the IAEA has protested, put the cameras back, restore them, put new camera, and they don't do it. Like, it's, you want us to do what? I know this is a family show, so I won't say what they're saying, but
it's not a family. No part of
they're
this is a family
basically
show.
saying, go pound sand. Okay, put it that way. Go pound sand. So every provision, of the JCPOA that was agreed to by the P5+1. P5 means the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, being Russia, China, France, Britain, US, +1, and that's Germany. Even they are now becoming unsettled. Let's put it that way. They're becoming concerned, worried. But they're still in these stupid talks over in Vienna, where, by the way, the US is not even present, is not allowed to be present in the same room, like face to face across the table. The US delegation, no, the US delegation is across the hall in some other room. They're not allowed to be in the same room. So what happens is, when the talks are broken off at the moment now, but when they were ongoing, and if they start up again, the Europeans go into the room, and the EU has a representative there too. They go into the room with the Iranians, and then they come out and they tell the little naughty boys out in the hallway, okay, this is what we said, and that's what they said. And then they go back in the room, and the US has to sit out in the hallway. And we've agreed to this. We're allowing this to happen. So this is where we are, and at the same time. And this is what's so dangerous. Not just that the US is perceived as, a pile of pudding, which it is right now. That's destabilizing enough. But there's Israel.
Yeah.
And Israel, of course, is in the bullseye.
And they don't take no shit.
And they would be the first target for the regime in Tehran, once it decides to launch a nuclear weapons strike. It would be at Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
And, the rest of Israel, which is not very big, it's a small country. So over the past months, I would say a good year now, I have heard Israeli leadership, and this spans the time from when Benjamin Netanyahu was still prime minister to the current time with the new coalition where Naftali Bennett heads the coalition and Benny Gantz is defense minister. Same. The leadership political and the leadership military has been speaking in more and more forthright terms. I don't know how else to put it. Clear, forthright terms. We are exploring other means. We are exploring other measures. Nothing is off and they're conducting training exercises with their jets.
Yeah, they're
openly saying you cross the red line, and Israel knows what its red line is. They don't say out loud what it is. I suspect it's probably at the point that Iran begins to attach its warheads, and I think they have warheads probably between 5 and 10 by now, when they begin to attach those to the nose cones of their missiles, which have also been tested. We know they have them. At that point, Israel would have to go. It's existential for Israel, with or without the US behind them.
And that's the important part
that's the destabilizing part.
Yeah, because Israel, and I say this, and I don't say this as a criticism of them. No. In 10 minutes, I'm having on Howard Bloom. He's an author. He's wrote a ton of books. He's a brilliant guy, but we're talking about his book today, The Muhammad Code, which is an entire tome about not only is it okay for them to kill Jews, it is their divine duty to slaughter them.
Yes.
Israel has, we are the fire department. And right now Israel's one guy with a fire extinguisher running into the World Trade Center. It's like, hey, whether or not you come with me, I'm going up there because I have to start putting this out. That's what's going to happen.
For their own survival.
For their own survival.
Absolutely. Jew hatred is doctrinal to Islam.
Essential.
It is a doctrine of the faith.
Fundamental.
That doesn't mean every single Muslim follows that or believes that or acts on that. They don't. But it is doctrine.
But enough do.
There's no getting away from that.
Enough do follow that, and enough who are actively pursuing nuclear weapons. Sure, some don't. One of the guys I have on here a lot, his wife is Muslim. She's the kindest woman in the world. She doesn't hate Jews. She also doesn't have a desire for nuclear weapons.
No.
The other two that do, this isn't some. So let's look at, we got to wrap this up in like 5-6 minutes, but let's look at like Donbass right now, right? So it's like, we can't use like empty words, right? We have to, we want to keep them as a buffer. We don't want them in NATO, but at the same time, we don't want Russia to get belligerent. So there's this whole, but we're talking about it very much as like, what do we wish would happen? It's like this outermost sphere of our protection. We're like, we would like this, but we wouldn't like this. This is not that. This is Israel in a sea of holy fire, that it's not, well, how is this going to make our future doctrine look? It's them or us.
It's crunch time is what it is.
It's a black and white. There's no.
We pushed this, kicked the can down the road as far as it can go.
Yeah. There's no, hey, the substitute teacher's not going to be here forever. There's none of this. It's, and they've done this before, right? We helped with Stuxnet, but they've done it with straight up, was it Egypt? Was it the Egyptian, what was the facility where Israel went and bombed and the fighter jets almost didn't have enough fuel to come back?
Oh, that was in Iraq.
Okay.
With Saddam Hussein's Osirak reactors back in 1981.
Okay. So they've shown, but that's what I mean. So they've shown they don't. Gerald Bull, the weapons expert who went and was taking
that
money.
long gun thing. Yeah.
His whole specialty was that, for all these third world nations that couldn't afford these billion-dollar weapons, what he could do
Here's
is
your alternative.
he could take old World War I artillery and kind of, he was genius. And Saddam hired him. They wanted to have a westward pointing gun and eastward pointing gun that could shoot. They wanted to shoot artillery shells something like 2,000 kilometers.
Oh, it was a crazy distance that it would have, theoretically anyway, have been able to do that. But
and on one note, was impressive and interesting, but he was actually he was picked up in a van in his home, wherever he lived, I think Toronto,
Canada.
Yeah. By some Mossad agents, and they brought in and basically said, "This is where we are, and this is what we're going to do." And he politely declined. He left. They dropped him back off outside of his apartment. He went into his apartment building, never made it to his door. A hit team took him out. I think keyed on that subset of. They don't care, and nor should they. They don't care.
It's existential.
Yes,
Israel is just too small. And we've heard the Iranian leadership more than once say something to the effect of, you can hit us with whatever you hit us with, and we would lose X tens of millions of people, but Islam would survive. Yeah. We hit you, Israel, and you're obliterated.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. And they have an obligation. They have an obligation to preserve their lives and their country and their sovereignty. That is an obligation. It's a Judaic obligation, but it's also an international law obligation. They have the right
to self-defense.
Anticipatory self-defense, for one thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where we're at right now.
And so we're painting this whole picture of how it is an existential and justified defense of their nation. Okay, but that doesn't, and you pointed out perfectly, that doesn't exist in a vacuum. They are on this planet with the rest of us. So whether or not we come to help, they're going to go hit them. Now, if that escalates, I mean, Israel had that old plan. Well, I think it was called the Samson option. And it was where if they were ever invaded, they would detonate a ton of nukes all around their border and basically set off every other nation's sort of almost like what David Hoffman calls the dead hand, that sort of response. They said, listen, you're going to help us, or, you're going to get off me, or I'm going to, turn on the fire alarm and scream rape. Everyone is going to get I'm going to get their attention. It's called the Samson option, alluding to Bible, where
there was a project back around, I guess it was the early 2000s, I think 2003, 4. And I think it was called the Daniel Project. I think you can still find it online, and it remains classified, the conclusions, but enough of it was made public that it's what you're saying. It's what you're talking about.
Yeah. And if I know about it, higher ups of the US, I would hope they know about it. So they have to know that if we won't put a red line down, Israel will, and Israel's actions then become our red line. So it's we're all tied in this domino system together. So with that,
on that cheery note, we didn't get to China, but we can do that next time.
We'll do that next time. We'll hit that up next week. And with that cheery note, I always leave these with a slight panic attack. And but that's why I love you, Claire, is because you pull my head out of the sand and tell me to look at the blinding sun. And I scream and cry, and then I invite you back to do it again. So, but
well, maybe not quite that.
I have you on for that reason. I will put your Twitter in the description, as well as all of your websites, which you sent me, and what we were talking about beforehand. I'll
send that to you.
Yeah, I'll pass that along. I have one more podcast after this, so I'll do it after that. So I'll do it in an hour.
Fine. That's fine.
We'll get that working. See you next Tuesday, 2 p.m.
Sounds
back to our original time, or not Tuesday, Thursday.
Thursday.
Back to our original time, 2 p.m.
Okay.
Claire Lopez, thank you so much. Wonderful patriot,
Thank you,
my friend. Take care, everybody. God bless.